Morality is basically slavery towards the mind. Now, it is not only slavery, it is basically slavery towards the mind, which is raised to a fanatical level. Now, why I'm saying this is because a lot of people will try to moral you, right? They will try to teach you on their morals as if, see, moral is what people collect from their parents because you're never born with morals, you're always taught them. So you acquire them just as you acquire literally anything in life. All pieces of information, all pieces of emotional attachments and the such, these are simply acquired. They are never something that you come with. You may tend naturally towards certain ideas of the mind because, well, you also have karma from previous lifetimes, and that will make you naturally tend towards certain things. But ultimately, slaves of the mind will always have morals, right? Because a moral is blocking yourself in rigidity. It is being slave to the mind, suffering because of it, and then creating even more layers of structure, one over the other, and lies and the such, because you need to support that. Morals will have you become more and more attached to them because, as I said, the more you practice something, the better you become at it. Now, unfortunately, since most people don't know how to correctly make use of their mind, they simply entomb themselves in all sorts of thoughts, all sorts of ideas, and, well, they fanatically support those, right? This sick society teaches you that you're never good enough. Once this becomes your belief, well, you're going to entomb yourself more and more into it. You're going to become better and better at supporting that you're never good enough, and you're basically sabotaging yourself. And when you end up supporting it with morals, well, that's basically when you become the apex of self mutilation, right? This leads to narcissists, right? This leads to self entitlement. Because when people suffer a lot, they need distractions, right? Because when you're constantly pulling yourself down with morals and ideas that you're never good enough, this always leads to entitlement sooner or later, right? Instead of a healthy opinion that you have a certain talent, a certain gift, you basically consider that you're much more than that, right? Because the more suffering you create, there is always a balance in all things. The more entitlement you also create, right? The more people have you suffer, the more entitlement you will create sooner or later, right? That is basically what narcissism is. A lot of entitlement because they aren't much. They are just people who are the apex of suffering, and, well, sooner or later, they will end up starting to create entitlements and all sorts of senses of perfection because, well, they are nothing of it, but they need a sense of survival, right? This means rigidity. You're fighting for certain thoughts, right? Your parents, when they want to control you, they teach you about morals, but those were their parents and their grandparents as well. These things, if you accept as being your normal, you will constantly fight for because that's how the intellect functions. The intellect is nothing else but a piece of the mind which fanatically defends anything you believe. So if you end up believing that you suck because your mother couldn't teach you anything better, or school or the such, well, that is a problem because you'll be supporting that as long as, well, you'll be supporting it. What do I mean is, if you have bad opinions about yourself, well, your intellect is just a dumb piece of the mind. It is a primitive warrior that fanatically supports anything you believe, anything you accept. But a belief, again, is nothing else than accepting something without a necessity for proof. As I've said, if you have low esteem about you, where is the proof, right? But create proof that you're not bad without this idea of entitlement. Because when you create entitlement, that's still meaning. And meaning means you're a slave of the mind. When you're a slave of the mind, you'll only create pain and separation. And separation itself will cause even more pain, right? And when this happens, you will need more distractions, right? To cover the pains. Because you will be alone. And you will feel misunderstood. And you will feel that the whole world is against you, right? Because When you create entitlements, everyone is against you, right? You want titles, you want achievements, you want recognition, but you can't achieve it because everyone feels like being against you, because you've embraced morals, right? Morality is the apex of slavehood towards the mind. Now, obviously, people who live by morals, they can't be anything else than, bubbles of entitlement, because morals, being the apex of slavery towards the mind, well, they can't exist without all the defenses possible, because the mind has two aspects to it, right? The mind is always defensive, and the mind is always confused. People who are slaves of the mind, they always are confused. They will always try to ask questions. Because questions asked by something which is always confused, those questions are distractions. They're not interested necessarily in your answers, right? They are seeking answers. It doesn't mean they don't, but it is more like a distraction from what they are constantly toiling, right, with their mind. The pains that they're creating to themselves with their minds and then projecting on others, right? Because entitlement means you must be above others, right? And when you create so much pain, it is always because of the others, not because of you, right? Because after all, when you're a slave of the mind, you don't know how to make use of your mind, right? Because you're not trying to transcend the mind. You're trying to beat the mind, but you'll never be able to beat the mind because it was designed to be used. You can never beat your mind. You can never outthink your mind, especially the unconscious one. It has more resources and it doesn't even need to rest. You need to rest. Your physical brain needs to rest. You can't beat the unconscious mind with your brain. You can try as much as you want. It has the power to beat all the humans at the same time without even flinching a muscle. So, being a slave of the mind has a lot of downsides. It can have, well, a sense of protection because it creates a bubble. But this bubble is more or less an illusion because it makes you alone. It separates you from everyone else. And this causes, narcissistic pains. It leads to feeling entitled above others because you're different or you perceive yourself different. A lot of people are like this. A lot of people use morals, but since you are closed-minded, you think that everyone is different and everyone is an enemy. When everyone is an enemy, you're a fanatic, right? Because only to a fanatic, everyone else is an enemy. The whole world is against them. This is how you create, this is how you can easily manipulate people, right? This is what society has been doing. Countries, religion, all sorts of these little bubbles, right? They are nothing but meaning that we have collectively agreed upon, right? My songs, my music genre, right? It's not even yours, it's just a meaning we have created, right? People fight for all the possible things and they are attached to, Hollywood stars or sports stars and the such, but ultimately it is nothing but meaning, right? And they suffer so much, right? And when you believe in something, you also have an illusion, you suffer from an illusion of inclusion. You think from the start that if you believe or you embrace a certain idea, you're already part of a group of people who support that, right? This is the main pillar of fanaticism. But in many of these groups, those people aren't necessarily united. That's the problem. They believe they are because they have a similar belief. But as I've said, fanaticism is always the most simple-minded viewpoint, right? The opposite of that is inclusion, which, that usually belongs to intuitive people or to people who have simply transcended the mind. Because you can finally accept people beyond the values of their minds, beyond the idea of judging them. If they want to suffer, let them suffer. You're not here to absorb their pains. You're not here to embrace their pains. You're not here to pull them out of their pains. Because as I've said, the mind can always be defensive and obviously confused. This is how the mind was, is, and will always be. When the mind is like this, right? When you say something that is different than their viewpoint, obviously the mind will become defensive and will start throwing all sorts of morals and virtues and views and all sorts of meanings. Basically, it will constantly go through the layers of lies that they have created. So if you speak with such a person for a while and you're intuitive, like usually I am, the point is you can simply read all their pains. Once you know that, you simply have researched all that you need about a certain person and you can simply let them be. Because obviously if they're fighting for their own pains, they're not worth your time, because their pains will always be more important than you. And you will also be more or less ultimately a pillar of support, because they need to vent off their frustrations on someone. So all this being said, if you ever meet people with morals and they want to teach you about those, well, just give them a pass, because, as a quote says, the wiser one gives in first, because they know it's a waste of time. You don't need to tackle slaves of the mind. Let them suffer enough, because once they suffer enough, they will want a way out. Now, depending on how much they want it, they will seek answers. And as I've always said, when you're on the side of the truth, you don't mind what other people believe. And I'm speaking about universal truth the way it is, right? If you are intuitive enough, if you are introspective enough, you know there is a universal truth. That is something which applies to literally everyone and everything. I've always told people that the mind functions the same, but people simply disregard this because they think that I call them the same as with people they don't like. This again is fanaticism, and as I said, it is nothing else but an inside-the-box view. And, well, when people simply disregard something, there is a set of pains that simply they have acquired or they have inflicted upon themselves. I'm not here to fix other people's pains. It will take way too long. But if people embrace their pains and that's the only thing they know, well, just let them be. Let them sink in their morals and, well, let them die in their own pains if that's what they want. If that's what they invest in, well, let them be. All this being said, you are appreciated. Take care. Hopefully this video is introspective enough for you. And, well, all this being said, Ferenc Board signing out.